Okay. So last month I spoke about who I was and why I was here, and we're going to talk today about right view. So in Buddhism, classical Buddhism, they have something called the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And Bhikkhu Bodhi, who was an American monk who went to Sri Lanka and was head of the Buddhist Publication Society for many years, wrote a wonderful booklet on the Eightfold Path. He also now has a hardcover book on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So we're going to go through each path factor month by month by month. So the best place to start, I guess, would be the first path factor, which would be right view. So the 8 path factors are right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Those are the 8 path factors found in the Four Noble Truths. So Bhikkhu Bodhi, in his book, said right view has 2 parts. The first part deals with karma, understanding karma. And the second part deals with understanding the Four Noble Truths at a relative and ultimate level, which I will talk about. So let's start with karma. Bhikkhu Bodhi felt that right view of karma was very important because it takes the place of a divine lawgiver. So if you were a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, you would have God. And God would say, this is right and this is wrong. And if you do something wrong, you would be punished. And if you did something right, you would be blessed. So Buddhism doesn't have a divine lawgiver. You're not going to be able to find God in Buddhism, which is very disturbing to some people. So let me clarify something, that the idea of God is not something that we don't believe in. The idea of God is not something we do believe in. The Buddha himself, as Siddhartha Gautama, was a theist. He believed in the gods, small gs, of India. But he found that there was a problem. They had a hierarchy of gods, from the smallest and lowest god to the biggest and best god. But they were all flawed at some point. And the one thing they couldn't do was end your suffering. So when you think about Buddhism, according to the early Buddhist tradition of Theravada, you're only going to think about 2 things. Number 1, why do we suffer? Number 2, how do we end that suffering? So karma is a vehicle for us to understand speech, action, and thought. So the Buddha said we have 3 kinds of karma. What we think is the least important kind of karma. It has the least amount of results. The consequences are the smallest. Then what we say, and that has a lot more consequence. It's also much stronger and influences the external world. And then we have what we do, actions. And that is the strongest karma, and that has the most consequences. So, as a Buddhist, if you have unskillful or bad thoughts, there's very little consequence. It comes and it goes. We have good thoughts, we have bad thoughts. The good thoughts don't give us much consequence either. We don't get a lot from that, but we don't get a lot from the bad thoughts either. Now we come to speech. And speech, as you all know, can influence the world in a very special way. Right now we're listening to all the politicians in the world, speaking, wanting to influence the world through what they say. Maybe not what they do, but what they say. Okay, we can use speech as a friend. It can allow us to have a better life. The idea with speech is we don't want to have false speech, malicious speech, gossip or idle chatter, or harsh speech. Those four kinds of speech create negative karma. Okay? So we want to have good speech, kind speech, polite speech, encouraging speech. That way, that allows us to create good karma and have good consequences. Okay, so we always want to think about the good and the bad, the skillful and the unskillful, and the consequences that they produce. Okay? So if we're polite, if we're kind to people in our speech, it'll come back in a very pleasant way to us. Now we come to action, the most powerful karma of all. And what we do influences the world in a very special way, but it also influences our family and our friends and the people that we live with in community. All this comes about by doing, saying, and thinking. Now there are a couple things that we don't want to do. Number one, we don't want to kill things. The Buddha gave us 5 precepts to work with. So when you become an official Buddhist, you accept the 5 training precepts of a Buddhist. Number one, I will practice not taking life. That means from the smallest life to the biggest life. I will practice not killing. So I'm not going to kill elephants. I'm not going to kill lions and tigers. I'm not going to kill cockroaches. I'm not going to kill ants or spiders. So as a Buddhist, what we need to do is find a workaround. Can we make our immediate area more pleasant without all the insects in it? How do we get rid of the insects without having to kill them? So say you have a mosquito that's flying around and around. What you would want to do is find some way to catch it and take it outside and let it go out there, away from your space, away from your area. Or if you have a cockroach, rather than just stepping on the cockroach and killing the cockroach, can we catch it and put it outside? And we all know, sooner or later, it will come back in, but we catch it again and take it out. Very hard to be born. I don't know if you've thought about this, but it's very difficult to be born. How long was it between your rebirths? And perhaps, if you're a Christian, Jew, or Muslim, this is your one and only birth. So where were you before you were born? In Zen, they might say, what was your original face before you were born? So how many years, centuries, eons was it before we were born? And then for some reason, 2 people on planet Earth liked each other enough for a short period of time to have us. And then we have only 50, 60, 70, 80 years, and then it's on to the next rebirth for a Buddhist, but it may be on to heaven, hell, or purgatory for a Christian, for the rest of eternity. This is a very important life that we have. This is what we need to think about as we go through our life. Is I want to be good, I want to be skillful, I want to create karma that benefits me and the people in my life and the community that I live in. That's the kind of karma I want to create. Then the Buddha said in his 5 precepts, don't take stuff, don't steal stuff, it's not your stuff, You don't need any more stuff. You already have enough stuff. And people think they own all the stuff they have. And why do they think they own all the stuff they have? Because they paid money and they got a receipt, and that receipt means that they own that, whatever it might be. It's all an illusion. It's all based on an economy. It's all based on working and making money and owning things and having a strong economy so we can all find our jobs and pay our rent and have a car. And if you start taking stuff from people, they'll be very angry. Now, I had a car back in the 1970s that I really liked. I bought it new, and one morning I went out and somebody had broken the window of my car and taken my audio cassette player out of the dashboard. And where that used to be was now just a hole. And I was so angry because I was paying payments on the car. I was paying insurance on the car. So I went over to my car and I yelled at my car and I said, "Who owns you, car? Who owns you, car?" And my car said nothing. Just silence. And I realized I didn't own that car. I was just using it until somebody wanted it more than I did. It was a wake-up call. And when I found Buddhism, it all made perfect sense because one of the truths of Buddhism is that everything is impermanent. Even your car. Maybe especially your car. Then, as we look at the 5 precepts, they talk about sex, and they say, be in love, be kind, enjoy the relationship. It's a very important relationship because that's why we're all here. Don't indulge in sexual misconduct. And if you don't love the person, at least be kind to them. They won't know the difference. It's okay. But the idea is kindness is so important in all our relationships, especially in our intimate relationships. And then the 4th precept is right speech. We already talked about that. But the 5th precept, this is the most difficult of all. The 5th precept says, do not consume intoxicants. Don't get drunk. And how lucky are we to live in California? We have marijuana that's legal. We have vineyards all in the mid-state. There's wine everywhere. There's tequila. There's beer. And what does all that stuff do? That stuff steals your wisdom. It makes you stupid. Even if you went to UCLA and got a master's degree, after a case of beer, you become illiterate. You can't even make a complete sentence. So when I look at the 5 precepts, I thought to myself, this is the perfect way to practice Buddhism. Because you can read a lot of books, you can listen to all the Dharma teachers talk about how wonderful the Dharma is. You can listen to people's stories about before they were Buddhist and after they were Buddhist, and how lucky they are to find the Dharma and how it changed their life. Doesn't do you any good. They're just words going in your head. And most of those words you're going to forget an hour later anyway. But if you decide to practice the 5 precepts every day, you will be involved in a Buddhist practice that pays benefits immediately. People will notice the difference. They'll be much more comfortable around you. They'll look at you and say, "Why are you such a nice person?" And you would say, "Because I practice the 5 precepts." And then they might say, "What are those?" And then you would say, "Let me tell you." But once we start getting involved in the practice of Buddhism, it does change our life. Listening to the Dharma, one way. very slow way of changing your life. Listening to Dharma talks, one way, a very slow way of changing your life. Practicing the 5 precepts, you change your life today, right now. Okay, so when we look at the 4 Noble Truths, when we look at karma, when we see that karma is a way we control our life and make our life better, then we get into the 4 Noble Truths, Bhikkhu Bodhi said. So we've got karma and we have the 4 Noble Truths. And what's the first truth? The Buddha said, I have understood through my practice of meditation and devotion and renunciation that life is ultimately unsatisfactory. It's never as good as you think it should be. It's never as good as you think it could be. You're always a little disappointed. Have you ever had a perfect hair day? How long does that last? I have a perfect hair day every day because I don't have any hair. It works well for me. So what we look at is, why is my life so filled with this dissatisfaction, this uncomfortable feeling that I have? What's the cause of that? And the Buddha said the cause of that is desire. Desire makes your life uncomfortable. You have a desire to hold on to the good stuff. Everything's impermanent. You can't hold on to it very long at all. You have a desire to push away the bad stuff. Well, we're not in charge. We're one of the contributing factors. Only one on all the good stuff and all the bad stuff. So there are a lot of times when we wish we weren't in this situation. We wish we weren't around these people. We wish, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we cling to the good. That doesn't work. We push away the bad. That doesn't work. We have a thirst. We know it could be better if only we were in charge, but we're not in charge. We're just one of the contributing factors of why everything in the world happens. We're all interconnected. We're all interdependent. So we have one small voice with all the millions of other voices on why stuff happens. It's so disappointing. But the Buddha saw that, and then he said, don't give up. I found the answer. I'm going to share the answer with you. The answer is nirvana. Nirvana is the end of suffering while you're alive. The end of disappointment, dissatisfaction while you're alive. Nirvana is the end of karma. You'll never be able to create karma again once you achieve nirvana. And because of that, you'll never be reborn again, ever. So, when you think about it, the reason we suffer so much as human beings is because we were born. And if you're a Buddhist, we were born many times. 1,000 times, 100,000 times, 1,000,000 times. Since the beginningless beginning, until we come to the end, we're being reborn, recycled, reborn, recycled. Sometimes we get to go to heaven for a while, 100,000 lifetimes, long time in heaven. It's really nice. We don't want to leave. But the karma that put us in heaven wears out because it's so nice we can't produce any more karma. And at one point, we're going to have to leave heaven. What a bummer that's going to be. And we might end up in hell sometime. Well, hell isn't forever either, and we're probably really happy when it ends, and the karma that put us there finally wears out. But it could be 1,000 lifetimes, even more, in hell, until we're allowed to leave. And go up the scale, or from heaven, go down the scale. And you can't achieve nirvana in heaven except in one place. There's only one place that you can achieve nirvana in heaven, And you know what that's called? That's called the Pure Land. Amitabha Buddha said, if you come to my heaven, everything speaks the Dharma. The birds in the tree, the fish in the pond, all the people that are there, everything is speaking the Dharma, and you'll be guaranteed to achieve nirvana in Pure Land heaven. But the rest of the heavens, no. You just have a good time and then you have to leave. So the idea is ultimately we want to achieve nirvana, we want to end our karma, because our karma is what put us in heaven, our karma is what put us in hell, our karma is what put us in the next lifetime. And if we have good karma, theoretically we should have a good rebirth. And if we have bad karma, theoretically we should have an uncomfortable rebirth until we get to be reborn again. So the Buddha didn't teach how not to die. The Buddha taught how not to be reborn. Okay, now we come to the Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, those 8 path factors. We need to understand them in 2 different ways. We need to have an intellectual understanding. We need to read the path factors. We need to listen to the Dharma talks. We need to visualize through concepts and images in our head what it means. What does right view mean? What does right intention mean? We need to know that intellectually. And if we went to school and learned how to read and write, and go to a bookstore or go online, we can download the Dharma and we can read it and we can understand it. But you know what? That reading and understanding does not end your suffering. It just gives you something to think about. Okay? That's why we have 2 different ways of approaching the Eightfold Path. One is an intellectual understanding, and one is an intuitive understanding. And I coined the term intuitive because this is what I understand to be true. The direct experience of something without all the concepts and models and paradigms that go along with it is an intuitive knowing rather than an intellectual understanding. So we want to understand it, and we want to know it, and the only way you can know it is to experience it. Can you experience the Eightfold Path? Can you experience right view, right intention, right speech? Can you experience those things? And yes, you can. We have certain circumstances that arise every day, every week, every month that allow us to come in contact with the direct experience, but most of us then will try to give it meaning and give it understanding. I want to understand what happened to me. Why did that happen to me? Okay, that's one way, but that's the intellectual way. And we meditate so we can increase our intuition, our intuitive part that is atrophied because we are such great thinkers and have so much knowledge that we've lost that ability to intuitively feel something. We want to feel it. What does it feel like? What does right intention feel like? Without the words, without the commentary. And that's the deal. I think that's what Bhikkhu Bodhi is speaking about when he writes, there are 2 ways of looking at the Eightfold Path. There's a practical way, which is understanding it. And there's an intuitive way, which is feeling it and experiencing it without the associated models and overlays that go along with that. So it's our job as a Buddhist to be proactive in our own salvation. Nobody's going to save us. Even if the Buddha was here right now, today, in this room, sitting right over there, he couldn't save anybody. He wasn't a savior. He was a teacher. He says, I will tell you how I did it. And I'll give you encouragement. but you're going to have to do it. Nobody's going to be able to do it for you. Your wife, your husband, your mother, your father, your children, whoever you want to name, they cannot save you. They can help you understand Buddhism, but they're not going to be able to help you feel Buddhism, that intuitive level. So this can be really scary for a lot of people. You mean I have to do it myself? You mean I can't petition a God to help me? Well, you can talk to Amitabha. There are rites and rituals as a way of getting in touch with Amitabha. But he's not going to save you either. He's going to take you to his pure land, his heaven realm, and everybody will teach you there. And then all that teaching will allow you to realize your nirvana, your salvation, your end from suffering. But even he can't do it for you. He can only give you the vehicle so you can do it yourself. And this can be really scary for people because they prefer to have other people do it for them. They would even be willing to pay somebody. Can you save me? I'll give you $1,000 if you can save me. No, I can't save you, but I'll take the $1,000. We are stuck. It's up to us to do it. But we have the best teacher in the world. And that is Siddhartha Gautama, that is the Buddha. And that is the first noble truth. How important karma is, what karma does for us, and how important it is to understand and intuit or feel the Noble Eightfold Path. I think that probably covers it. Yes? Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? No?
Not yet. Maybe later.
Okay, so we'll end it there. We'll end this session now. And then the next time I come, I'll talk about right intention, which is the second noble truth. And we'll just go through the 8 noble truths, and then I'll speak about each one individually. And then at the end, we'll put them all together and see what it gives us. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you. May those of us who have come together today in mind and heart be happy, peaceful, and free from suffering. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. May no problems come to us. May we always find fulfillment. May we also have patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome the inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. May the suffering ones be suffering-free, the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief. May the sick find health relief.